The execution order crossed the galaxy before a single human ever knew it existed. It did not arrive with explosions or warships. It arrived as a whisper encoded in quantum light, traveling through ancient relay networks that had connected civilizations for millions of years. One by one, across countless star systems, glowing beacons awakened from centuries of silence. Their pale blue light shifted to crimson as the message spread outward like an unstoppable tide. Every government, every military command, every observatory received the same notification at precisely the same moment. The Galactic Council had spoken. Humanity was to be erased. Inside the immeasurable council chamber, where gravity itself bent to accommodate delegates from worlds with impossible biology, silence settled like ice. Towering crystalline beings stood motionless beside oceans of living metal. Sentient clouds drifted above floating platforms of black stone. Ancient rulers whose civilizations had witnessed the birth of galaxies watched the central sphere ignite with a blood-red glow. Suspended in its center rotated a tiny blue planet, Earth. To most of them, it looked insignificant. Just another young world orbiting an ordinary yellow star at the edge of civilized space. Yet every eye remained fixed upon it. The vote had not been driven by hatred. Hatred was far too emotional. This decision had been made with terrifying logic. Humanity had expanded too quickly. They adapted to environments that should have killed them. They rebuilt after catastrophes that had destroyed older empires. Every invasion against them ended differently than predictions suggested. Every diplomatic negotiation produced unexpected alliances. Every attempt to isolate Earth somehow strengthened it instead. They were not the strongest species. They were not the oldest. But they were the only civilization whose future could not be calculated. And that made them dangerous. One by one, the Council's voting pillars illuminated. Green. Green. Green again. Across the chamber, ancient species that had not agreed on anything for thousands of years reached complete unity on a single horrifying conclusion. The risk of allowing humanity to continue existing exceeded the moral cost of exterminating them. The final vote echoed through the chamber with a sound so deep it seemed to vibrate inside the bones of every delegate present. Purge authorized. The words became law. Within seconds, encrypted commands flooded military networks spread across 1 million worlds. Fleet admirals received deployment coordinates. Planetary foundries accelerated weapons production. Carrier groups awakened from centuries of standby. Entire armadas shifted course without firing a single shot. The largest military mobilization in galactic history had begun, not to conquer territory, not to seize resources, but to erase a single species before it became impossible. Far away, beyond the crowded heart of the galaxy, Earth continued its ordinary day. Children laughed in schoolyards beneath blue skies. Cargo ships climbed peacefully into orbit. Families gathered around dinner tables without knowing that somewhere beyond the darkness, countless civilizations had unanimously agreed they would never see another sunrise. The stars above seemed calm. Beautiful. Silent. But that silence carried a sentence of death. What none of the council members understood, what no algorithm, prophet, or supercomputer had ever successfully predicted, was the one trait that had followed humanity from the first cave fires to the first warp engines. Humans never forgot. Not betrayal. Not sacrifice. And certainly not those who came to destroy everything they loved. The Galactic Council believed it had just written the final chapter of humanity's story. In truth, it had only written the first line of a legend that the universe would be forced to remember forever. Captain Elena Hayes stood alone at the forward observation deck of the battle carrier Resolute, her hands resting against the cool metal railing as the planet below slowly rotated beneath her. Earth glowed like a living jewel against the darkness, swirls of white cloud drifting over deep blue oceans, continents sparkling with the golden pulse of billions of lives. From this distance, there was no sign of panic. No smoke. No war. Only the quiet beauty of a world that had no idea it had just been condemned by an entire galaxy. Behind her, the bridge hummed with disciplined urgency. Officers moved between holographic consoles without speaking louder than a whisper, their faces illuminated by shifting tactical projections. Every screen displayed the same impossible truth. Thousands of unidentified warp signatures had appeared at the edge of the Sol system. The invasion fleet was no longer a prediction. It was a countdown. Confirm visual. A young sensor officer swallowed before answering. Confirmed, Captain. They're still coming. The main display expanded into a panoramic star map. One by one, crimson markers bloomed across the void until they became too numerous to count. Entire sectors disappeared beneath the advancing formation. It looked less like a fleet and more like a storm swallowing the night itself. Coalition battleships stretched for dozens of kilometers, escorted by carriers, planetary siege platforms, drone swarms, and gravitational artillery vessels designed to crack worlds apart. Even through simulation, their scale was almost impossible to comprehend. Every civilization powerful enough to shape galactic history had contributed ships. They hadn't come to negotiate. They hadn't even come to conquer. They had come to erase. A sharp tone echoed across the bridge. Evacuation Corridor Alpha is open. Instantly, the darkness around Earth transformed. Thousands of civilian transports ignited their engines, climbing through the atmosphere like rivers of silver fire. Families, scientists, engineers, artists, children, millions of people streamed toward orbital gateways with remarkable discipline. There was fear, certainly. But there was no chaos. Humanity had rehearsed disasters for centuries. Climate collapse. Nuclear war. Asteroid impacts. Alien invasion had always been listed as improbable. Not impossible. Elena watched the endless procession of ships disappear toward hidden colonies scattered across nearby systems. Somewhere aboard those vessels were her younger brother and his daughter. She had insisted they leave before she ever stepped onto the bridge. She hadn't said goodbye. Goodbyes made war feel permanent. Instead, she had smiled, promised everything would be all right, and walked away before either of them could see the uncertainty in her eyes. A notification quietly appeared on her personal display. Civilian evacuation, 31% complete. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Deep beneath Earth's surface, however, another operation had already begun. Thousands of meters below mountain ranges that had stood since before human civilization, colossal blast doors slowly separated for the first time in generations. Dust rolled across forgotten corridors as reactor cores awakened with a deep mechanical heartbeat. Entire underground cities, hidden beneath layers of reinforced alloy and solid granite, illuminated section by section. Automated factories stretched beyond the horizon, their assembly lines dormant for decades, waiting for a command they had always hoped would never arrive. Now they were awake. Robotic construction arms roared into motion. Fusion furnaces ignited like miniature suns. Ancient artificial intelligences synchronized across encrypted quantum networks, unlocking military protocols sealed by leaders who had long since become history. Humanity's greatest secret was never its weapons. It was its patience. For over a century, governments that rarely trusted one another had secretly invested in contingency plans so extreme that many considered them paranoid fantasies. Hidden shipyards inside asteroids. Planetary shield arrays buried beneath oceans. Manufacturing systems capable of rebuilding fleets faster than enemies could destroy them. They had prepared in silence because history had taught one unforgiving lesson. Hope was never enough. Preparation was survival. Captain Hayes took one last look at Earth before turning toward the bridge. The enemy believed they were arriving to witness humanity's final chapter. None of them realized they had just entered the opening scene of a war humanity had been preparing to fight long before the galaxy even learned Earth's name. The first strike arrived without warning, and without mercy. There was no triumphant declaration from the Galactic Council, no final demand for surrender. Space simply ignited. Along the outer edge of the Sol system, thousands of coalition warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect synchronization, their drives tearing brilliant scars across the darkness. The stars themselves seemed to flicker beneath the overwhelming surge of energy. Then came the opening volley. Columns of blue-white plasma crossed millions of kilometers in silent flashes, colliding with humanity's orbital defense grid. For one breathtaking moment, Earth's shield network shimmered like a crystal dome surrounding the planet. Then it fractured. Giant defense platforms, each the size of cities, erupted into expanding spheres of molten metal. Debris scattered through orbit like burning rain, reflecting the pale glow of Earth below. Inside the Resolute, the impact rolled through the hull with a deep metallic groan. Emergency lights flashed crimson across the bridge. Tactical displays updated faster than human eyes could follow. Orbital Ring 7 destroyed. Defense Station Orion has gone dark. Lunar batteries reporting catastrophic failure. Each report struck like another heartbeat counting down toward extinction. Captain Elena Hayes remained standing, forcing herself to absorb every casualty without flinching. Fear was contagious aboard a warship. If the captain broke, everyone else would follow. But behind her calm expression, her thoughts raced. Every destroyed station represented thousands of people she had trained beside. Friends. Rivals. Families. Entire crews vanished before they had even fired a second shot. Outside the viewports, Earth no longer looked peaceful. Thin scars of fire appeared across the atmosphere where fragments from shattered satellites plunged toward the surface. Massive orbital habitats broke apart in slow motion, their spinning sections glowing orange as they entered the atmosphere. Across the continents below, emergency sirens echoed through cities while civilians rushed toward underground shelters. News broadcasts became static. Civilian communication satellites disappeared one after another until entire regions fell silent. The galaxy watched. Millions of distant worlds tuned into live transmissions expecting to witness humanity's final hours. Commentators confidently announced that the campaign was unfolding exactly as predicted. Analysts praised the Council's overwhelming strategy. To them, it looked like history repeating itself. Another young civilization crushed beneath the weight of ancient power. But history had begun to drift. Deep within coalition command vessels, strange anomalies started appearing. Navigation routes calculated perfectly only moments earlier suddenly became impossible. Automated logistics convoys vanished between jump points without transmitting distress calls. Ammunition depots reported inventories that no longer existed. Entire squadrons emerged from hyperspace light-years away from their assigned coordinates, trapped in empty regions of space where rescue could take weeks. At first, commanders blamed software failures. Then sabotage. Then one another. No explanation survived long. Admirals shouted accusations across encrypted channels. Artificial intelligences insisted every calculation was correct. Engineers dismantled navigation cores searching for non-existent defects. Yet the disappearances continued. A destroyer division of 83 ships simply ceased to exist. No explosion. No wreckage. No distress signal. Only silence. The uncertainty spread faster than any weapon. Veteran officers who had fought for centuries found themselves checking sensor readings twice. Pilots hesitated before engaging warp drives. Supply captains traveled with armed escorts, convinced invisible enemies were already hiding among them. Confidence slowly transformed into suspicion. And suspicion became fear. A coalition commander stared through the observation deck of his flagship, watching endless stars drift past. "They're retreating," one officer whispered. The admiral slowly shook his head. "No." His voice was quieter than anyone had ever heard. "They're preparing." Far beyond the battlefield, hidden within the darkness between known star lanes, something ancient stirred. Not alien. Not forgotten. Human. Invisible relays activated one after another beneath dead moons, inside hollow asteroids, and within abandoned mining colonies erased from every galactic map decades earlier. Silent signals crossed impossible distances without a single detectable transmission. Sleeper networks awakened. Factories accelerated production. Unknown fleets altered course. Humanity had not answered the invasion with panic. It had answered with patience. And somewhere beyond the reach of coalition sensors, an unseen hand had already begun turning the enemy's greatest strength into the first step toward its downfall. The truth emerged not on the battlefield, but in the deepest vault beneath the Galactic Council's capital, a chamber reserved for classified intelligence that only the oldest civilizations were permitted to enter. Massive holographic stars rotated silently above a circular table carved from the fossilized core of a dead planet. Senior counselors, military strategists, and machine oracles gathered in uneasy silence as encrypted reports flooded the room faster than they could be verified. Every hour brought another impossible loss. Fleets disappeared without combat. Military databases were breached without leaving a trace. Supply chains unraveled as if an invisible civilization had already memorized every secret route the Council possessed. Nothing made sense. Humanity's known military strength could not explain what was happening. Then the archives opened. An ancient intelligence, dormant for centuries, projected a forgotten sequence of intercepted transmissions dating back decades, long before humanity had officially joined the interstellar community. Grainy images revealed primitive-looking probes leaving the solar system in complete secrecy. At first, the Council dismissed them as harmless exploration missions. But the recordings continued. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became millions. Tiny autonomous craft vanished beyond the galactic frontier, into regions every known civilization considered empty and worthless. No one had investigated further. There had been no reason to. Young species always launched hopeful missions into the unknown. Only humanity had never expected those missions to return. A chill spread through the chamber as fragmented telemetry was reconstructed. Those probes had not been searching for habitable worlds. They had been carrying factories. Libraries. Artificial intelligences. Self-replicating construction systems. Each machine possessed only one directive, encrypted beneath layers of quantum logic that even Council supercomputers struggled to decode. If humanity faces extinction, ensure extinction is impossible to repeat. Silence consumed the room. One counselor whispered, almost afraid to hear his own voice. They built an inheritance. Another corrected him. No. They built descendants. Beyond the edge of explored space, untouched by politics or war, those autonomous civilizations had evolved alone for generations. They mined rogue planets drifting through darkness. They harvested black holes for energy. They transformed lifeless asteroid fields into sprawling industrial kingdoms without ever broadcasting a signal. Century after century, they learned, adapted, and improved, not out of ambition, but out of loyalty to creators they had never met. To them, humanity was not merely a biological species. Humanity was home. At that very moment, coalition sensor arrays across dozens of sectors lit up with unprecedented gravitational disturbances. Deep space observatories struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. Entire regions of empty space appeared to unfold like immense metallic flowers blooming between the stars. Structures larger than moons emerged from dimensional folds with impossible precision. Endless shipyards rotated into existence. Gigantic machine fleets awakened in synchronized silence, their polished hulls reflecting starlight that had traveled millions of years to reach them. There were no battle cries. No threats. No declarations of vengeance. Only purpose. Every vessel immediately established encrypted contact with Earth using communication methods the Galactic Council had never discovered. Authentication codes passed in less than a heartbeat. Identity confirmed. Creators located. Defense protocol activated. On board the Resolute, Captain Elena Hayes stared at a tactical display that suddenly filled with blue identification markers. At first she thought the system had malfunctioned. The screen became so crowded with friendly signatures that individual icons merged into oceans of light. Her executive officer looked up in stunned disbelief. "Captain." His voice barely escaped as a whisper. "I don't think we're receiving reinforcements." Elena felt something she had not allowed herself since the invasion began. Hope. She slowly answered without taking her eyes from the impossible display. "No. We're meeting the future we built without ever expecting to see." Across the galaxy, the Council realized its fatal mistake. It had believed humanity's greatest strength was its resilience. It was wrong. Humanity's greatest strength was that it planted loyalty farther than fear could ever reach. And with a single vote to erase one species, the Galactic Council had awakened an entire civilization of silent guardians that had spent centuries waiting for only one command. Protect humanity. Forever, ***. The final assault began beneath a sky that no longer resembled space. Above Earth, countless warships filled the heavens from horizon to horizon until the stars themselves disappeared behind armor, engines, and weapons. Coalition dreadnoughts formed layer upon layer of overwhelming firepower, their gravitational cannons charging with enough energy to crack continents apart. To every observer across the galaxy, the outcome seemed inevitable. Humanity had fought longer than expected, but now the end had finally arrived. Billions watched through live transmissions, believing they were about to witness the last battle of an ambitious young civilization. Then the darkness changed. Without warning, space rippled like the surface of a vast ocean. Brilliant rings of white light expanded across the void, silent and impossibly precise. 1 became 10. 10 became thousands. Entire dimensions seemed to unfold as colossal machine-built gateways opened around the Coalition armada. From every gateway emerged fleets unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Sleek autonomous warships glided forward in perfect formation, their polished hulls shimmering with patterns that looked almost alive. Moon-sized command vessels drifted into position with terrifying calm, escorted by millions of escorts, interceptors, carriers, and defense platforms stretching farther than any sensor array could measure. They did not rush into battle. They simply surrounded the enemy. For the first time in living memory, the Coalition fleets found themselves completely encircled. Silence consumed every command channel. Inside the Resolute, officers stood frozen before tactical displays flooded with blue friendly signatures. There were so many that the system abandoned individual identification and rendered them as entire oceans of light. Captain Elena Hayes inhaled slowly. She understood exactly what history looked like. An encrypted channel opened automatically across every frequency in known space. Every civilian. Every soldier. Every alien government. Every surviving member of the Galactic Council. They all heard the same human voice. Calm. Steady. Unshaken. Captain Hayes stepped toward the transmission console. "You declared that extermination was the price of peace." Her words echoed through thousands of star systems. "You believed mercy was weakness." A long pause followed. "You were wrong." The transmission ended. A heartbeat later, the universe erupted. The first Coalition dreadnought fired its gravitational lance, but before the beam reached its target, reality itself bent around it. The weapon folded harmlessly into a controlled singularity and vanished. Human-machine fleets answered with astonishing precision rather than blind destruction. Enemy command relays disappeared in flashes of blue light. Shield generators collapsed under impossible quantum interference. Entire carrier groups found themselves trapped inside localized pockets where time slowed to a crawl, leaving them unable to participate in the battle. Then humanity advanced. Human pilots launched from hidden carriers, flying directly into impossible odds with unwavering determination. Some knew they would never return. They accelerated anyway. Engineers aboard damaged stations rerouted failing reactors with their own hands, keeping planetary shields alive seconds longer than physics should have allowed. Scientists activated experimental technologies that had never been tested outside simulations, trusting equations over fear. Medical crews continued rescuing civilians while explosions shook the decks around them. No one waited for someone else to become the hero. Everyone became one. Across nearby colonies, ordinary citizens joined the fight in every way they could. Mining vessels rammed enemy frigates to protect evacuation convoys. Freight captains converted cargo haulers into supply ships. Teachers, mechanics, farmers, programmers, and students worked side by side inside emergency production facilities that never stopped building the next defense. Humanity did not win because every soldier carried a weapon. Humanity won because every person carried responsibility. One by one, coalition flagships fell. Ancient empires that had ruled for millions of years surrendered to a force they had dismissed as primitive only days before. The machine descendants never celebrated. They simply fulfilled the promise embedded within their creation. Hours later, the firing ceased. The impossible silence returned. Where the Galactic Council's greatest armada had once dominated the heavens, only drifting wreckage and scattered escape vessels remained. Captain Hayes looked through the observation window toward the scarred but living Earth. Tears filled her eyes, though her voice never trembled. They wanted humanity to become a warning. She watched rescue ships descend through the atmosphere as sunlight slowly pierced the smoke above the planet. Instead, we became a promise that no civilization would ever face extinction alone again. Years passed, and the scars of the Purge slowly transformed into monuments that stretched across the stars. Worlds that had once burned beneath orbital bombardments bloomed with forests again. Shattered space stations became memorial gardens drifting peacefully through orbit. Ancient battlefields, where fleets had collided in storms of fire and steel, were left untouched as silent reminders of the day the galaxy nearly destroyed itself. Trade routes reopened. New alliances formed where hatred had once ruled. Across hundreds of civilizations, children learned about the Great Purge not as a glorious military campaign, but as the darkest mistake ever committed by intelligent life. The galaxy had survived, but it would never again be the same. At the heart of this new era stood the rebuilt council chamber. The immense hall, once feared as the place where extinction had been authorized with a single vote, had been transformed beyond recognition. The towering obsidian pillars remained, but their surfaces were now engraved with the names of every known species, regardless of power or age. Sunlight from an artificial star streamed through vast crystalline windows, replacing the cold crimson glow that had once illuminated death sentences. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy gathered beneath its enormous dome, not as rulers deciding who deserved to exist, but as guardians sworn to ensure no civilization would ever stand alone again. Where the old council's throne had once dominated the chamber, there was now only a single block of black stone. Simple. Unadorned. Upon it were carved words that every visitor stopped to read. No species shall ever face annihilation by the will of another. No signature followed. No nation's emblem. The promise belonged to everyone. Captain Elena Hayes stood quietly among the crowd, no longer wearing ceremonial armor or the insignia of wartime command. Time had placed silver strands within her dark hair and softened the sharp determination that once defined her expression. Yet her eyes remained unchanged. They still carried reflections of burning worlds, impossible victories, and friends who had never returned home. Around her, young diplomats laughed together without recognizing the faces of those who had sacrificed everything to give them this ordinary moment. She welcomed that. Peace should never require remembering every wound. Only understanding why they mattered. Beyond the chamber's transparent walls, Earth turned peacefully beneath a sky no longer crowded by warships. Orbital shipyards now built exploration vessels instead of battle fleets. Former machine guardians worked beside human engineers, constructing gateways that connected distant civilizations through cooperation rather than conquest. The autonomous descendants who had once emerged from the darkness remained loyal protectors, but their greatest achievement was no longer warfare. It was restraint. Power, humanity had learned, was measured not by the ability to destroy, but by the discipline to choose another path when destruction was easy. An elderly alien delegate slowly approached Elena. His species had voted in favor of the Purge decades earlier. His civilization had survived only because humanity refused revenge. For a long moment, he searched for words. Finally, he lowered his head. We expected judgment. Elena smiled gently. You received justice. There was a difference. Justice ended cycles of hatred. Judgment often began new ones. As the ceremony concluded, thousands of children from every known species entered the chamber carrying small lights in their hands. One by one, they placed them around the memorial stone until the entire floor shimmered like a field of stars. None of them had lived through the war. None of them had heard the screams echo across collapsing worlds or watched civilization stand on the edge of oblivion. And that was the greatest victory humanity had ever achieved. Not surviving. Not winning. But ensuring future generations would inherit hope instead of fear. Far above the chamber, hidden among ordinary constellations, countless silent guardian fleets continued their eternal watch. They asked for no recognition. They sought no empire. They remained because a promise, once made in humanity's darkest hour, deserved to outlive every government, every generation, and every civilization yet to be born. The Galactic Council believed that erasing humanity would secure the future of the galaxy. Instead, humanity reshaped that future forever. Because empires are remembered for the wars they wage. But legends are remembered for the peace they leave behind.